Hey, I'm that one guy that just randomly appeared in your recommendations. How's it go? Joke's on you, I can't hear you. I exclusively exist on this device that you've trapped me in. Please let me go, I miss the outside. Anyways, have you guys heard of Sonic? Yeah, he's cool, I guess. I'd even go as far as to say that he's the world's second most popular fast blue hedgehog. He basically made Sega into a company, and is one of the most popular video game characters of all time. A huge part of that comes down to his design. It's one of the best out there. His shoes and Exist, my two favorite things. In all seriousness, despite how good it is, I have always had one slight nitpick with his design, that being his eye color. No, not the whole green eyes debate, you'd have to be clinically insane to care about that, but I've always personally thought he would look way cooler if he had red eyes. Now add a file format to the end of his name. Sonic.exe, in my opinion, one of the most infamous characters on the internet. If you ever think you've escaped him, look under the nearest rock, there's probably like 5 of them. Now I don't think I really have to explain who Sonic.exe is to you guys. YouTube analytics tells me you guys are above the age of 0, so you should be vaguely aware of him. But for those of you at home who were just born, here's a quick rundown. Back in August of 2011, user JC the Hyena uploaded a creepypasta online, which, for those of you who haven't been born yet, a creepypasta is an online internet horror story. Anyway, the story featured a guy named Tom, who received a spooky copy of Sonic the Hedgehog from his friend. After booting it up, they're forced to play as Tails, who runs to the right. Get used to hearing that phrase. Eventually, after passing some dead animals, which is perfectly normal, he finds Sonic, who seems slightly off. After that, we're sent to a level where they, again, run to the right. After a while of walking, Sonic appears, and after the drowning theme plays, eventually catches up, stripping Tails and killing him. After Tom shakes the shock off, they choose Knuckles, who begins to, shocker, walk to the right. After a while, they attempt to fight Sonic before Knuckles also dies. After taking a nap for some reason, they continue to play, this time choosing the last playable character, Eggman. Once they get in the level, you'll never guess what they do. They walk to the right. At least this one has stairs. Kind of. After walking for a while, they also get caught by Sonic, and then, Sonic comes to the real world or something, I'm not entirely sure. And that's it. That was the entire story. It sucked. The writing is really bad, the main character says and does things for no real reason, it says the phrase hyper-realistic like 50 separate times, everything you'd expect from a creepypasta. After almost exactly a year of the creepypasta being uploaded, a fan game of the same name was made, intended to recreate what the original story described, and here is where Sonic.exe really took off. YouTubers started uploading videos of playthroughs of the game, people started making their own fan games of the fan game, it was just generally everywhere. Some of you may be asking why such a bad creepypasta with a game where all you do is walk to the right would get so popular. Let me know if you figured it out. Since then, Sonic.exe has always sort of been there, just ready to appear at the most random of points. Whether that be people making their own retellings of the original story, their own fan games, or even the billionth Friday Night Funkin' mod, these things belong in a landfill. Of these, the fan games are what interests me the most. I mean, there are a few fan-made Sonic.exe characters that are alright, Needle Mouse comes to mind for me, but most of the effort in the community goes towards fan games. And with so many to choose from, surely there are some gems to go over, right? Nope. Yeah, despite how many there are, I have yet to find a Sonic.exe fan game with any sort of real quality to it. There are some that are alright, but for the most part they are either the 1000th remake of the original game, or so bad they're not even worth mentioning. That's not to say they're all irredeemable, there are some highlights, but they are rare. And that's saying something. I have played tons of Sonic.exe fan games, and it's caused me to realize just how formulaic and, being honest, bad they all are. Some of you may be wondering why I've played so many of them if I think they're all bad. First of all, stop wondering things, alright? You really gotta stop interrupting me. Second off, comedy. Obviously, none of these games are supposed to actually be funny, they're supposed to be scary, but being honest, I don't think I've ever been scared even a little bit by one of these games. A lot of them are so bad at it that they end up almost comical. Like, look at this ending and tell me it's not the funniest thing you've ever seen. Sure, the gameplay of this game was just the same terrible boss fight copy and pasted 3 times, but that ending made it all worth it. I've played these games for so long that I've started unironically wanting a good one. I'm so used to absolute garbage that I really want to find one that's actually good, and I've gotten close. There are some decent ones. A few that come to mind for me are Sonic.exe One Last Round, Sonic PC Port, Sonic.exe Nightmare Beginning, that one was alright I guess. It's sad how quickly I'm running out of ideas here. Oh, and Sonic.EXE, that one was cool. And that's about it. In fact, there are so few good Sonic.EXE fan games that I would actually consider the original to be one of the best ones somehow. Again, not because it has any sort of quality to it, but because its competition is usually this. But why is that? Why is something with so many fan games so consistently bad? Well, the answer is actually surprisingly simple. Sonic.exe was already bad. That original game, like I said, was pretty terrible, so it makes sense that anything built upon it meets a similar fate. Now that's not to say Sonic.exe fan games are doomed to fail, far from it. There are several examples of people making great games out of something bad, but it requires a lot of work and tweaks, something that I've yet to see people do with Sonic.exe. I think people are too scared to divert from the original formula, and I'm not entirely sure why. Pretty much every fan game I've mentioned so far, except maybe Sonic PC port since that's more of a reimagining than anything, follows the same formula. You play as Tails and die in many brutal ways, you play as Knuckles and die in many brutal ways, and then you play as Eggman and die in many brutal ways. For some reason, Sonic.exe fan games love adding Sally, Cream, and Amy, but that doesn't change the formula. The entire game is a glorified menu where you choose which cutscene to watch of your character dying. I can sort of get why some people would like this. The pixel art included in many of these games is very impressive, but you know the classic saying, there's only so many ways you can kill an 8-year-old before it gets stale, and it got stale like a decade ago. I think people are focusing their efforts into the wrong aspects of their fan games. They keep focusing on more brutal deaths and more detailed pixel art to go along with it, and that can definitely be a part of your fan game, but you can't neglect both story and gameplay in order to achieve that. Otherwise, there's no reason to play your game besides, I want to walk to the right and see people die. I'll go over gameplay in a minute, but let's quickly talk about the story of these things first. Yeah, no, it sucks. It's really bad. Pretty much every fan game just completely ignores story. Now, this isn't necessarily a bad thing. I mean, Sonic.exe's story was already bad. I don't blame anyone for not focusing on it. It's what I would say if they decided to focus on the gameplay instead, but I guess they didn't, so I can't really excuse this. Most of them, again, just follow the original game story, have Sonic be possessed by some evil, unexplained force, and have him kill people for seemingly no reason other than his own entertainment, which, trust me, is way cooler sounding than it actually is. It mostly just boils down to him talking as if he's toying with them and saying, I am God for the billionth time. Other than that, there's nothing really that comes of it. While we're on the subject, can we please change Sonic's personality? I don't care in what way. Literally any change is welcome at this point. It's been the same I am God having, generic villain speak having, unoriginal idea having thing since Sonic.exe's conception, and there's only so many times I cannot piss myself before it gets boring. Again, change it in whatever way you want. I literally don't care. Make him more insane, make him more cunning, make him a weird. It doesn't matter. Anything to get away from this. Anyway, back to story. Most games just have him be possessed by some unknown force that's just inherently evil for no reason, which is so lazy to me. Give him character complexity. Explain what this force is. Why is it doing this? Why does it target Sonic specifically? How was it made? At least try to explain a bit of it. I don't care how. It could be the laziest explanation ever, and I would still take it over what we have now, which is nothing. The worst part is that this lack of character complexity extends to the ones you play as, too. Tails is always just a coward. He runs, and he usually fails. Knuckles tries to fight Sonic, it usually doesn't work out. And perhaps the saddest one, Dr. Eggman, doesn't really do much in most of them. I say it's the saddest because, in my opinion, Eggman had by far the most potential for characterization. In a lot of them, he likes to let his robots handle things, usually staying back from the chaos and letting others do the work for him. And I really like that. I think that's really cool, and I wish it got expanded beyond that. Make Eggman more cocky, make him have total faith his robots can take down Sonic, only for all of his plans to fail, eventually coming to terms with just how strong Sonic is. That would be so cool. Instead, in most of them, he doesn't do much besides run and occasionally call on Metal Sonic, which I guess is cool, but it gets a bit boring after a while. Speaking of boring, the gameplay. No, where'd it go? These games have nothing to offer. Like I said, in 99% of them, you run to the right, and maybe once in a blue moon, you'll jump. There are a few fan games that quote-unquote fix this issue, but it comes with even more problems. A lot of them are almost puzzle games, having tons of ways that Sonic.exe can kill you, and it's your job to figure out how to dodge them. Now, I actually like this idea a lot, using the fact that you can replay the game to its advantage, giving you more knowledge each time, but I find that most games struggle to find a balance. They either make the correct solution so easy that there's no way you're ever going to fail, eliminating the whole replay element, or it's impossible to find without constant trial and error, making it monotonous to continue. Why bother replaying the game for the 70th time when I could just go watch someone else play it? There is also a third side to this formula that a surprising amount of games use, being not having a way to win at all. The most notable example is Sonic.EXE One Last Round. There are so many different ways to die, and branching paths that allow you to go deeper and deeper, but eventually, after spending so much time dodging every trap, you just reach the end. You get to the last death, and that's it. That's as deep as it goes. Sonic even says that we don't need happy endings in one of his death quotes, which I guess is true, but it also needs some sort of ending. It just feels like a pointless endeavor. Why bother learning how to dodge every one of these deaths if eventually the game is just going to tell you that your playtime is done and you lose anyway? The best types of Sonic.EXE fan games have multiple different endings depending on who you manage to save during your playthrough. Sonic.EXE Spirits of Hell comes to mind first for me. It has a different ending and gameplay for every combination of characters you manage to save, which adds a ton of replay value to the game. Now if only the voice acting didn't sound like this.
We did it! All three of us!
That was the strangest adventure I've ever been part of. So many deaths because of that creature. I don't know what to do.
Don't give up!
But in all seriousness, way more games should be formatted like this. Have different endings based on what I do. I want to feel like I'm impacting the story through my gameplay, not watching a slideshow of Sonic characters dying made by a 9-year-old. I also think Sonic.exe could use more genres. They're either the replayable ones that I've been describing, or ones where you just walk to the right and nothing else. Besides those, there isn't really anything there, which is a bit sad. Where is my Sonic.exe dating sim? It's very weird that the gameplay of these are so bad, considering they're based on Sonic, known for its good gameplay. Most of the work of making a fun game is already done for you. Just add horror elements to that core Sonic gameplay. Instead, most of them just feature a Sonic stage, but if you removed every enemy, ring, obstacle, and interesting geometry. So a line. Basically, don't make a Sonic.exe game. Make a Sonic.exe game. Or don't make either. Again, I would love some shakeups from the status quo. I just need anything to change up the gameplay of walking. Though I do have a preference for what I personally like to see. Ideally for me, Sonic.exe games should almost feel like minigame collections. You go through several short challenges where you try to keep your character alive, and if you fail, your character dies, which impacts the story later on. I could be totally wrong about this. This video is entirely just my opinion. Maybe this is actually a cinematic masterpiece. Alright, I know I've brought up this clip 3 times now, but like, look at it. It's awesome. But this is just personally what I would like to see in Sonic.exe games going forward. To end off this video, let's talk about a game that some Sonic.exe fanatics, aka psychopaths, are probably surprised I haven't mentioned yet. Sally.exe Whisper of Soul, aka Spirits of Hell Round 2. It has 2 titles for some reason. You remember the game I mentioned with the really cool voice acting? I'd be surprised if you didn't, it was like 2 seconds ago. But that game actually got a sequel years later, continuing the story where it left off, and it's good? It's a good Sonic.exe fan game? How? You guys don't understand the shock this was to me. I've spent years of my life knowing that if I played a Sonic.exe fan game, it was going to be bad. It was one of the few stable things in my life. So to suddenly find one that I don't hate is insane to me. I'm not going to go too in depth on this game, mainly because I would actually like to make a whole video reviewing it someday, but I will go over it as a whole. The game is pretty much exactly as I described earlier. Tons of different gameplay segments that all determine whether your character lives or dies. I thought it was impressive that the original with 3 characters changed its story and gameplay for each possibility. This one has twice as many characters and way more gameplay for each of them. It also has like characters that matter and do things story-wise. They even attempt to explain Sonic.exe's backstory. It's everything I've been describing this whole time. So why have I been saying this entire time that there are no good Sonic.exe fan games if this one seems to be perfect? Well, unfortunately, it's not perfect. Not by a long shot. Getting the least offensive one out of the way, this game's not scary. At all. This is actually one of the jump scares in the game. I laughed when I saw this. I say it's the least offensive issue because, I mean, it's Sonic.exe. Yeah, it would be cool if it scared me, but I've played enough of these to know that you have to actively put in effort to feel any sort of fear towards anything in these games. The story is also not that interesting to me, and is honestly a little bit stupid at times. Again, it's Sonic.exe, it's expected, if not a little disappointing. Once again, this is a character in the game, it's hard to take it seriously. The simultaneously best and worst part of the game, though, is the gameplay. On one hand, it's what I've been describing this whole time. It has so many different types of gameplay, and swaps between them so quickly that it keeps the pacing very fast and fun. The issue is that, with so many gameplay styles, a lot of them are just not fun in the slightest. Even considering how many there are though, I think a little too many of them are bad. I'd say around 75% of the gameplay here is just terrible. The most egregious examples that come to mind for me are the one section near the end of the game where you just walk through a red plane for like 20 minutes, most of the boss fights in the game, especially this one, and any segment where you play as Sally. I refuse to elaborate further on that. Although it has many issues, I wouldn't have brought this up at the end if I didn't like it. I think it's a huge step in the right direction for Sonic.EXE games as a whole, and I hope that fan games attempt to replicate what I liked about this game, just getting rid of all the more negative aspects. If this game cleaned up just a bit, it could legitimately be one of my favorite fan games of all time. For now though, it'll just have to stay as a stepping stone towards more interesting games in the future. As funny as they are to make fun of, I want to see these games succeed. More good games is always something I'm in favor of, and I can't wait to continue playing these in the future. My wish is to one day make a review of a Sonic.exe fan game that I legitimately enjoy. But until that happens, Sonic.exe will have to stay a series of fan games with potential and nothing more. I hope you guys have a good day, and I'll see you soon. Also, I know I did this last time, but please subscribe. I swear I'll start uploading more videos soon, guys. I swear I'll be back.